Come on in, it's another edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. All is truly and indeed a blessing. If you can just see beyond the veils, come on in, welcome, greetings and salutations. I'm always truly honored and appreciative of my international audience. Thank you so much, Blog Talk Radio. Welcome Belgium, welcome the UK, welcome Australia, welcome United States. Come on in, Nigeria, Cameroon, welcome Democratic Republic of Congo. Greetings and salutations. Kabar Ghani, Kenya, come on in. Greetings, South Africa, welcome, I'm truly honored. Argentina's checking in, Brazil is checking in. Thank you so much, Turkey's checking in. All is a blessing. It's another edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. My chat will be open in both platforms momentarily. blogtalkradio.com/the-divine-prince. Join us for another edition of Spirit and Spiritual Phenomenon, Dreams and Visions. We're going to talk about dreams and visions today. Come on in at area code 845-277-9143. 845-277-9143. The phone lines are open. Press the number 1 on your telephone keypad. I'll be more than happy to bring you in to this conversation. Greetings, beloved, the Goddess Initiative. Welcome. Certainly grateful and appreciative of you and your energy and your family. Come on in and represent, Mama. Come on in. Greetings and salutations. My co-host will be with me, presumably momentarily, but all is a blessing. Let me put my banners up. You can join me live on screen by following the StreamYard URL located at the bottom of the screen. Please feel free to join us here with your microphone and your webcam. You can also join me at 845-277-9143. Alafia Ifatomiwa. Greetings, beloved. Certainly I'm honored and appreciative. Grateful for your attendance and your support. Love my community, love my New Orleans, love my trans-African, pan-African community, globally, wherever we might be. Come on in. Greetings and salutations. Come on in. I don't know why Periscope is giving me such a problem, but all is a blessing. Greetings, Chef Bushi. Welcome, beloved. Thank you so much to you and yours. And the beautiful Queen Orisha, Ashley Allen, greetings and salutations. All is a blessing, all is a blessing. My co-host had an early start, so it might just be me today, y'all, but all is a blessing. Eshu Elekbuana Kosi Were Awo Oluto ni Iwo Ada Afanbo Osi Obatala mi Ita ni Ebo Onilio Abane Shu. Eshu is the respected elder who flogs, confronts, and uncovers fools. That one versed in mysteries uses truth to own you. He causes scatter to feed poverty. Obatala shakes rascals to have sacrifice. The owner of warnings is the one who is Eshu. Aboru, Aboye, Aboshikshe, Ashe. May I ever reach a rune. May I ever be accepted. May our Ebo allow what we desire to come to pass. And so we say, Ashe. Divine, all blessed greetings and salutations, one and all, individually, collectively, universally. You are now sitting live with the Divine Prince, Pan-African spiritualist, practitioner, author, and advisor, Elagoon, Oloye, Hoodoo, Obeya, Bokur, sharing with you in all things spiritual, mystical, metaphysical, cosmic, evolutionary, revolutionary, healing, and holistic from a Pan-African Hoodoo world spiritualist perspective. Understanding that all is truly and indeed a blessing. If you can just see beyond the veils, for it is all just an illusion and a test, and one of the greatest divine mysteries of this life cycle. This is indeed my constant prayer, my mantra, affirmation, reverberation, my reiteration, and it is my ever-living reality. All as a blessing is crucial to the very foundation of my inner standing, my teaching, my walk, my work, and my demonstration along this divine, all blessed life path and journey. All as a blessing is indeed where I begin and end and crystallize all my endeavors, understanding that I and I alone create and co-create my divine destiny, and I alone create and co-create my divine, all blessed reality. And so it is. Ashe. Greetings and salutations. I am so humbled, honored, and appreciative by my co-host and my guest and my visitors and my listeners and my viewers who take the time out of the middle of your day to be present here with the Divine Prince, House of the Divine Prince, Thai Potions, Hoodoo Central, and of course my powerful and beloved cousins who also join me here in the middle of their day, Oloye, Ifawole, Oladeji, Efuntade, and the many others who, whatever time schedule not time schedule, whatever time zone you're in the world, I'm always grateful and humbled by your taking the time out to be present here with us in this shared sacred space. And let me not neglect my fans. Indeed, I am most appreciative of my fans. My long-term listeners know that's code word. For indeed, they hear every word, they see every movement, they're observing every action, every detail. And without them, my numbers would not be what they are. And for without them spreading the word and inviting others to view and partake, I wouldn't have such a strong platform. So I'm grateful for my friends, my family, my supporters, those who are doing the work, our godchildren collectively within our communities, our ilays, our houses, our ministries. And of course, I am honored by my second cousin who just joined us and hid her face for momentarily, the beloved Otun, Ifatomiwa. I'm grateful for you and I'm appreciative. And I think it's important that I'll let you know this show is being viewed all over the world. This audio backup that goes to Blog Talk Radio is being listened to all over the world, not just in the motherland and in those communities that we believe ourselves to be familiar with, but communities outside of the motherland, that still amaze me each and every day that they speak our language, understand the spirit that's, being shared here in this shared sacred space. And I say it's a shared sacred space because it's created and recreated each and every day by choice, by will, by desire, in some cases by need. Many are being fed, others are being confirmed and held up, others are being taught something new, and so we create this shared sacred space by being present and bringing our energy and participating in the show topic, and using the phone lines at 845-277-9143. And of course, sharing your messages of love and support and questions and commentary in the chat. All is acceptable, just be respectable. I think we all can agree to that. So welcome on the advice of the beloved Iya Otun. We're kind of doing a part 2 to this topic of spirit and spirit phenomenon. I did add a colon, dreams and visions. And indeed, we can talk a little bit more about dreams and visions and our experiences, around that, if you will. But of course, the topic is always open to, helpful, needed, edifying discussion from both the chat rooms in Blog Talk Radio, but also here at YouTube, Periscope, Facebook, all the people who can access this StreamYard chat. So I'm going to open the mic to my cousins, give myself a chance to get a little bit hydrated. I'm sort of in the dream and vision state. I don't know if you saw the documentary that I showed before the show. I hope that answered many questions some of you might have around sort of the quantum metaphysical scientific, foundation for much of what we've been discussing and sharing. Indeed, not only the US government has done all sorts of research into telepathy, thought projection, being able to sort of scry or remote view is the terminology, other locations, other government facilities in other countries. But we also know that those same sort of experiments were done in Asia, were done in Germany and in Russia and many, parts of the world. And I think it's an interesting thing that we somehow see science as a conflict to, the power of our ancestors. I think it's more miraculous that our ancestors were able to demonstrate and live this science without necessarily having the words, or the formulas that we've come, to know today. But when we look at the great monuments, the great mounds, the great and created sacred spaces, of the world, indeed they understand something bigger than themselves, something higher than humanity, something higher than even Earth and our existence on Earth. And so I've always saw dreams, and to some degree even visions, as a gateway into not only other dimensional spaces, but also God's way, Spirit's way, sometimes even our ancestors' way of giving us a glimpse into, heaven or other places in the universe, or the ability to see ourselves, if we believe the prophets in some of these magical books, in the future tense, or having made some adaptation of that which is presented to us in the dream or the vision. So at a very basic level, my understanding and my teaching has always been that we aren't allowed these glimpses for entertainment. We aren't allowed these glimpses just to scare us or just to, give us pleasure, in the temporary. There's always some deeper meaning, some deeper message going on in the receiving of dreams and visions, and the interaction with spirit and spiritual phenomenon that returns us to who we really are. And who are we really, Oloye? Gods.
Mm-hmm.
We are gods.
That is correct. We are. Whatever spiritual tradition you follow, I believe that there are similar texts that speak to us being a divine replication of God, even as we speak of the various names of the Orisha, which are divine manifestations of Olodumare himself. And then we go maybe into Islam with the 99 attributes of Allah. And we speak of Christ with the various names that they might have for Christ. So when I look at Orisha, I look at Orisha as divine manifestations of Olodumare that manifest within us, and that as we draw that energy out, we then have a closer attachment to spirit, to Olodumare, through our attachment and our relationship with Orisha. But let me also share a quick prayer to Rumila, as today is Oshe Ifa, Oshe Oshun, Oshe Olokun. Today is Oshe Aje, the daughter of Olokun, as well as we also give offering to Eshu. Eshu can be given any of the days as well. And of course, our Ori is to be given any day, any time, no matter how much you want to give reverence to your own Ori, your own divinity, the holder of your destiny. So today, okay. Yes, in some lineages, they also give to Egbe today. So we give honor to Orumila. I give praise to Orumila, witness to destiny. I salute you. Orumila, I greet you 3 times. Orumila, I greet you. Orumila, I greet you. Orumila, I greet you. If I fix your eyes upon me and look at me well, for it is when you fix your eyes upon a person that he or she is rich. It's when you fix your eyes upon a person that he or she prospers. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. So when we're talking about dreams, from one of the perspectives of our tradition, there are certain Orisha that connect deeply, that can manifest dreams a great deal. While all Orisha can bring forth dreams, there's a couple of them that are known to be bringing deep, deep dreams. One definitely being Olokun, because of the depth within Olokun. One definitely being Obatala. Obatala can bring out some dreams, the wisdom of ancestors and the wisdom of within ourselves that have to be revealed at the time. Although all Orisha, even Oshun can bring some definite deep dreams as well. So within our dreams, as far as the Ifa perspective, it still fits in with much of what my cousin was talking about. The depth of the dreams and the meaning of the dreams may be in relationship to what the Orisha desires for you to know and to see, because they are seeing much more deep within yourself than even you from this plane can see. So now they're giving messages. Messages might come from your ancestors as well. Your ancestors might be saying, you need to step up here, or you need to make a change here. You need to go in this direction. You need to follow this path. So each and every one of these Orisha, yes, Egbe does bring vivid dreams as well, because it's that divine communication with your astral twin up in Ororun. So in each of these, the dreams can be very, very vivid. They can be very, very lively. And they can therefore give you a deep, deep, deep communication. Some people get nervous when these dreams come that deep. But if we learn to embrace the messages that come from our Orisha, from Egbe, from our ancestors, when we obey in those messages that are given to us, a lot of times we see significant change, but we also see the truth of what it is that they are bringing into being for us. So dreams for us are very, very important. Some of us have deep dreams. Some of them, it skips us and hits our children instead. But, you know, it's according to how you relate. For some of us, it might be when we meditate, we're seeing certain things. It might not be the dream, but it might be when we're meditating, we're sitting there quietly, that we see visions of what spirit has for us to know, or to what desires for us to do or to see, all of that. So just a little bit to help hopefully get us started as well in the direction and communication and the journey for today. You know, don't be afraid of your dreams. Don't be afraid of your dreams.
And even the great magical book says, in the last days, God says, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, your young men will see vision, and your old men will dream dreams. And so we know the power of dreams and visions have been an integral part of many um, traditions and cultures and practices since the beginnings of time. And how then do we differentiate between what is a dream, what is a vision? And just a quick sidebar, I believe, cousins, that we all have dreams. I believe our ability to remember them or to capture them can be altered by a series of things. Our sleeping patterns, what stressors we might be dealing with in life. People who tend to be workaholics and whose minds tend to go like mine, 24 hours a day. I often don't go into REM sleep. I have to really make a concerted effort to go into REM sleep for very long periods of time. And sometimes I have to work my way up to it. I get a little bit more rest today, I get a little bit more rest tomorrow. And then maybe by that third day, I go into what we call that deep sleep, where you don't get out of bed for several hours and you're deep under and bring that information back. Similar to you, I was taught that unknown realm, was a realm of Olokun, Mamiwata, many other deities that I could invoke right now who represent the depths of mystery and the unknown. And in some cases, that which is unknown, even still to humanity. We realize that even science doesn't quite know, what's at the bottom of the sea beyond a certain depth, doesn't have the equipment to handle the pressure, the force, to provide the oxygen, if they're going to take a human down, don't even have the equipment that could, extend life under that kind of pressure. And so there's a realm of not just outer space that's, ignorant to humanity, but even inner space that's ignorant to humanity. I remember growing up in the days when they said we only used 70% of our brain. And even as a child, I wondered, what did that mean? What was hiding, what was harboring in that part of our consciousness that we supposedly, aren't accessing. Science has updated that to some degree, but there's still a great deal of unknown skill and ability that I believe we've inherited even in the evolutionary process of becoming humans, that have now, melded, amalgamated into our sensibilities, our ability to tap spirit, to go in and out of spirit, to be sensitive to energy changes, vibrational changes. And these are things that we inherit, first from nature. In the conversation of spirit and spirit phenomenon, I believe there's also, along with Loa and Orisha and powerful deities and the like, I also believe that there's that which exists in nature. Those spirits that exist in water, that exist in the trees and the earth and in the plants, that exist in the air, that exist in the elements of fire that make up creation. And these powers and forces are also able to sort of interact with us, sometimes directly and other times through dreams. And I believe that dream language is as unique and individual as humanity is. And that's why I strongly suggest keeping a journal. Learning your own spirit language. How does spirit speak to you? A fish representation in my dream may not mean the same in Otun's dream, might not mean the same in Oloye's dream, might not mean the same in Tony Val's dream. We grew up in that period when it was said, if a woman dreamt about fish, somebody in the house was pregnant. And, we found that to be quite true. But I've also found that those symbolic representations have transformed from individual to individual, family to family, even through the changing of culture, tradition, how we live. The Orisha, the powers in the spirit realm, are constantly elevating and then elevating us to higher octaves of understanding. So I want to talk more about dreams, visions, the power of those dreams and visions to not only influence our thinking and our decision making and confirmation of our being in tune, if you will, with spirit, but also understand how we create and recreate our reality, you know, also by using these tools and applying these tools. One more thing, Otun, before I pass the mic. I remember even as a child, what probably one of my earliest memories when me and Rapani were growing up was our ability to sort of get in a chair. At that time, it was leather. And we had leather, not pleather, leather. Okay, we had a leather couch. You know, we had a huge leather recliner, which everybody would sort of compete for. You know, that was sort of like the rocket ship chair. And we would, you know, sit quietly because our mom believed in meditation, even as a child. You know, sometimes children are bouncing off the walls and, you know, they didn't run out of things to do. You know, my mom would either say, create something, read or study something. But then there were times she would say, sit quiet and meditate. So we would sit quiet and meditate, you know, might have some music in the background, but we were able to rock ourselves spontaneously, innocently, intuitively, as children of 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, into a unified trance state. It wasn't like we were both in a sort of this separate reality. We could rock ourselves into this unified trance state and then visit the little children on the other side of the world, which was often China, Japan, Korea, you know, which again, as kids, you know, we thought was interesting. We didn't realize how weird that appeared, you know, to other people who heard that story and understood that we were telling that story as a part of our reality. But then now with the technology of DNA and then finding out I have sort of this connection to Asia and Asiatic communities, you know, it makes a whole nother level of sense to me as a child. But that's the earliest thing that I can remember in terms of having any controlled, lucid control in a dream state or in a vision state. And for those who aren't familiar, lucid is when you're not just dreaming, but you're conscious that you're dreaming, even in that state. And therefore, you can make choice and decision and movement and action that typically, you know, we're sort of disconnected from, you know, when we go into the dream state. I believe often our dreams that come when we're sleeping come because we can't necessarily respond or react right away. And some of those things that might be harder for us to sort of piece together in our consciousness, in our waking states, you know, will often come, you know, through our dreams. So there's a complicated, you know, series of information, downloads, you know, reviews of experiences, past and future, that we encounter interdimensionally, but while we're uniquely in the dream state, as the indigenous Americans call it, you know, or in some sort of trance or possessive state. I know I said a whole lot, Otun, but greetings, beloved. Come on in.
Aboroboye, Boshishe, cousin Divine, Baba Oloye, my cousin as well, and family watching and listening. I also want to give respect and greetings to my Aluo, Prince Baba Adebayo Latona, and Olari Ifatoyen, Iyalode Egbenike Oyebola Latona. I agree with all that has been said so far. I would also like to add in addition to dreams being messages and things that we need to be aware of and things that are being brought to us, we also need to be mindful of the mindset that we're in before preparing for bed, to include the energy that you're allowing yourself to absorb, what you're exposing your ori to, such as if you watch television, things that you're watching, if you watch the news, and we all know the news is death, mayhem, and destruction. And then like 5 seconds before it go off, oh, look, a puppy. And then it goes off. But everything before that was all trauma. So we have to be mindful. Those, you know, you have some people that like watching scary movies or action movies. We have to be mindful of the energy we surround ourselves in before we prepare for bed, because all of that will play a factor in our dreams, what happens, what doesn't happen. It can have an effect on it. So that is something also to keep in mind. There have been lucid dreams. I have had several lucid dreams. That is something I would say that a person would need to get used to, because the first lucid dream I ever had was absolutely out of control, and I did not like it at all. So we have to understand, one, that we have to be careful where our mindset is, and also to remove all elements or illusions of fear, because that can also have an effect. Again, it all plays on our mindset. So we have to be mindful of that and where we allow our energy to go before we take rest for the evening. And also to pray, to ask that our mind be set right and in a manner in which we can receive that which we're supposed to receive if we have been watching the news or watched some kind of film, but to be mindful to care for our energy before taking rest.
Absolutely. I think that's should be sort of our natural health regimen for our body. Because we might, soak our teeth at night and brush our teeth before we go to bed, or put on your face cream or your mask, but I don't think we are even taught outside of spirituality and religion, and ATR practice, to take inner measurements that are also about exercise, about health, about wellness, about taking care for. And I like how you talked about being mindful of what you're listening to and digesting before you go to bed. And that's not just movies and TV and entertainment, beloved. That's also our work. Many of you are taking your work to bed. You might be police officers or attorneys or RNs or other medical professionals or educators, safe house, operators. These are all the people that I talk to on a regular basis. People who have tenants, that they're dealing with in all of their drama. And so what Otun just said about that becoming a part of your wellness, I think I added wellness routine, is very important. I remember having an experience, I don't know, back in my 20s maybe. Even today, I sleep with some kind of sound on at night. And for me, it is about white noise. It is about distracting one part of my consciousness, which allows me, to sort of rest. And it's an interesting thing because, the TVs now, the smart TVs now have timers on them, and they go off. The second it goes off, I'm woke. I'm woke. So when I was a kid, it was the radio, then we moved to TV and color TV and cable. And of course, cable would provide music channels or very specialized, channels that you could sort of tune your TV on. And this one particular time I had gone to sleep, and somehow now the movie The Exorcist was on. And I've seen The Exorcist, I don't know, thousands of times. And no, it wasn't The Exorcist. It was Psycho. It was Psycho. I woke up and Psycho was on the TV. The woman was in the shower scene. The music is going. The knife is flying. And I saw, even in that moment, that connection between what I had been dreaming and thinking about just before I woke up and what was, now, on TV. Even commercials you know, disturb my spirit to some degree. Even if I'm fully woke, you know, I tend to mute or move. And some of you all do the same thing, move on to other channels during commercials, particularly predictable commercials. I've seen them before. I already know how they feel. I already know what kind of energy, you know, I experience, you know, when I expose myself, you know, to those commercials. And yes, those things can absolutely affect your dreams, your vision, your tool as a body to connect to spirit and into the spirit realm. Also, what we eat is important. You know, grandma used to say, you know, you can't eat sweets and lay down on it. Or you can't eat greasy foods and lay down on it. You can't eat heavy food. And we, you know, we thought that was just old wives' tales or just something grandma says, you know, but in their own, you know, innocent, simplified way, it spoke to being conscious of what we're eating and then laying down on. And our body takes a great deal of energy to digest food, by the way. I think my cousin Oloye talked about that the other day, that, you know, we're eating all this heavy food right before we lay down, and your body is not sleeping. It's giving all that energy into digesting. And so digestion really should be something that we do, you know, during the waking state, you know, before you lay down for the night, go down, you know, for the count, whatever time of day your schedule might be. And think about, you know, what we're eating and expecting to fuel not just our bodies, but our dreams, our spirits, our visions. I find that the diet that I eat today, which is, I'm going to use an official term here, flexitarian. I'm a flexitarian, which means I primarily eat vegan, vegetarian for the most part, but I'm not necessarily scared of chicken broth, or I'm not necessarily scared of, you know, a dairy product on the occasion, but those aren't things that I, you know, eat every day. And so I found that not only my capacity to hold energy, not just my own, because in the case that you're a healer, a practitioner, a minister, you hold in other people's energy too. And sometimes really otherwise negative things, you know, things that make people sad, things that make people cry, things that make people emotional, things that people are concerned about, stressed up, you know, about. My oldest client, 86 years old, caught COVID, you know, and we all kind of went through the COVID thing with her, you know, a few months back, you know, being worried about her survival, you know, praying for intercession from the spirits and from the ancestors. So what we eat, how we go about our wellness maintenance when it comes to preparing for bed, being conscious of what's on in the room, being conscious of those things that wake you up at night, you know, that we could turn off or turn down or unplug, you know, that would otherwise interfere with our ability to not only dream, Oloye, and I know I said a lot, but to remember, you know, our dreams, and even particularly as adults, and then bring that forward. Sometimes writers describe that as writer's block, you know, and we don't question often, well, what do they mean by that? You know, because their ability to write or ability to paint or create is often coming from the dream state, often coming from their ability to transcend, you know, intra-dimensional space. A musician to some degree has to hear the song, has to feel the rhythm, might in their imagination need to see and hear and experience the final product before they can then bring that to paper, transcribe it to paper, and then, you know, transcribe it, you know, to instruments.
As well, you know, even those of us, there's a lot of us now that are doing the spiritual work, whether they're doing it through tarot, whether they're doing it through Dafa, Ifa divination, whether you're doing it through whatever realm, bones or cowrie shells, whatever the case might be. And for diviners that are able to they receive the messages to bring a deeper teaching or a deeper message from spirit to whoever it is that is on the map. And so even in that realm, spirit connection is essentially can be very, very deep if you allow it to connect with you. When I look back to our elders and our ancestors today, you made mention that some of them would have dreams about fish and then all of a sudden say, you know, somebody up in here is pregnant. But if you remember some of our elders, it was even deeper than that. You can walk up in the house and they would tell you, they'd have your whole story. They'd know all these things about you, and some of it you didn't even know about yourself. Our elders and our ancestors had this absolutely deep connection with spirit, whether they were following Christianity or whatever it was that they were doing. They had this very, very deep connection, not only with spirit, but with ancestors. They might not speak about that. They might not say too much about that. But if you listen to them very, very closely, you'll hear them in whatever they're telling you. You're doing this just like so and so. I see so and so in whatever it is that you're doing or saying. Your connection with so and so, I can feel that. They give you a clue of their connection with the ancestors, as well as they're guiding you or chiding you. You know, so I go ahead.
I said, depending on the occasion.
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, we have to, I really feel like our elders and our ancestors, we have so much to learn from them if we sit at their feet, even from them teaching us the history of our family. Some of us underestimate when our elders and ancestors are teaching us the history of our family. There is a tremendous amount to learn from that also go into the connection spiritually for you to understand why maybe they have this divine connection and these divine messages that come that they relate to you. Sometimes your relationship is a download from those elders and ancestors directly to you. So sometimes we don't even realize by sitting at the feet of these elders, they're giving you direct transmission. And especially when others in the family are not interested in the history or some of the information of the family, they're downloading a whole bunch of things when they're praying for you, when their hand are on your, what they call the crown chakra, and they're praying for you, or the third eye, and they're praying for you. Have you ever felt the power of these ancestors, of the elders' prayers, and how they absolutely can you feel a whole energetic difference when those ancestors who are truly walking in alignment with their spirit, with their inner divine consciousness, it changes you, but you don't know the download that they're putting into you.
Yes, and they confer that energy upon people, places, and things. I indeed believe a person, place, or thing can be blessed, anointed, just as well as it can be cursed. And that opens another conversation. Area code 951. Area code 951. Thank you so much for being with us. Your hand is raised. Who's calling, and where are you calling from?
This is Neo Ifatomiwa.
Oh, okay. Greetings, beloved.
Greetings, everybody. I wanted to chime in on this. I really wanted to jump in on the webcam, but for some reason it just wasn't working for me again. So I decided to go ahead and call in real quick. With this topic, it is great to get into because it opens up realms of science. If we bother to look into it, it'd be fascinating to see if we can tie in some of these interconnections with, I believe the study is quantum biology. A lot of people understand or have some small semblance of an understanding of quantum physics, but they don't necessarily get into quantum biology and the inroads that science is making on understanding that that area of study, mainly because of what advances they're making with understanding magnetics, with birds navigation, flies navigation system, how they are able to migrate from one place to another, and how that ties into string theory and how their brains are structured, which helps us understand how our brains are structured. It's fascinating when you start really thinking about the electricity that scientists don't necessarily have a name for it, but our ancestors call it the spirit or the soul or the duat or the Kaaba. We have different names for it, but as far as mainstream science, they don't like using those names or words and terminology. But it's clear that our ancestors had a great understanding of this this energetic realm that we call the dream state. You know, what's going on when you monitor the brain while you're dreaming? What's going on with the electric waves and things of that nature that are going on? What areas of the brain are firing while in this dream state? Is measurable on a magnetic level, mainly because you can't have one without the other. You can't have electricity without magnetism or gravity. So when we're looking at these similarities and we start expanding on that and look at the bigger picture where our planet does the same thing, it's just that it's so large, it's so massive that it just looks like a lightning storm, or it looks like certain events in nature, right? So imagine, if you will, the being involved in the dream of the planet, right? Stuck in a lightning storm, right? Just my imagination kind of wandering off into La La Land, like I like to call it. But even if you dive down into, like, say, tarot, and you start looking at the three different planes that the major arcana are divided into, then you start looking at which cards are associated with the zodiac as they're in their separate planes. They're all divided up, except for the fire signs. Fire signs only exist on 2 planes, but clearly there's 3 planes that they're divided up into. So, you know, these fascinating things that even when you look at the tarot system itself is divided along these dream planes. So I just want to throw that in there, just give like some food for thought for people to kind of like dissect, and maybe they didn't have an inkling of this, and they can, you know, kind of dive into it and explore it. It's really interesting.
I certainly appreciate it, and you know, I always appreciate it coming from someone other than myself, and particularly from people of various generations, from various, you know, excuse me, places of understanding, excuse me, about this topic. It's not new. It's indeed as old as the universe itself. I think the exploration of it is new, in terms of where humanity is in its progression right now. And we're moved from this information age into this digital age, which, like the movie The Matrix, you know, sort of gives us an introduction, a doorway into looking at life itself from a very different way. And I think it's hard to look at the magic, the voodoo, the Ifa, and not look at the math, the science, the quantum metaphysics, the string theory that comes along with it. According to superstring theory, there are at least 10 dimensions in the universe. M theory actually suggests there are 11 dimensions in space-time. What's called bosonic string theories suggest there are 26 dimensions that exist at one time that allow us this reality that we believe or perceive that we are experiencing. The idea that this could just be a program or just be a dream in God's mind. I heard someone say that in a rap lyric in the last 24 hours. You know, what if God woke up and all of this just disappeared? Suggesting that this could indeed be a imaginary creation, even in the mind of the creator or creators itself. So when we look at string theory and understand dimensional space, the first dimension being length, or what's called x-axis, a straight line with no other characteristics. The second would be height, or the y-axis, which could be added to length to produce two-dimensional objects, such as a triangle or a square. And then the third dimensional space being depth or z-axis can be added to the previous two dimensions to produce objects that create volume, like a cube or a pyramid or a sphere. And we know and we understand through physical archaeological proof that our ancestors understood this in some way, spoke this language in some way, recreated this basic, but it's not so basic, is it? This physics, mathematical, scientific formula that our supposed advanced culture is still grappling with, but just now really beginning to break through to. Depth or z-axis can be added to the previous two dimensions to produce objects like volume, like a cube or pyramid or sphere or a box. And this is the end of the dimensions that are directly, physically perceivable by human beings. All the other dimensions are beyond the third, are theoretical in terms of our human ability to sort of experience them. The fourth dimension would be time. Time inhabits a dimension unto itself. And the fourth dimension is the position in time occupied by a three-dimensional object, meaning time itself is relative to space. That's not why we now hear the term space-time. It's relative to where a three-dimensional object exists in space at any given time. Consider that all the spatial bodies are moving about. The planets are moving about, the stars. Nothing is consistently in one space, the way we sort of see it on a two-dimensional map or in a picture. Everything is constantly moving, vibrating, shifting, spinning around, following a predetermined, sort of pattern. So time is relative to where a person, place, or thing with the first three dimensions, where it exists at any given point. The fifth dimension represents possible worlds. The fifth dimension is a world slightly different from our own, from which we could measure similarities and differences to our own world. That's the fifth dimension. The sixth dimension, a plane of all possible worlds with some that have similar start conditions as our own. So that means there's a dimensional space where there's a plane of all possible worlds that can be imagined, that we can even think of, particularly because they start with similar conditions upon which we understand or believe we understand our reality to have been born out of or created out of. The sixth dimension is a plane containing all possible universes with the same start conditions as ours, i.e. the Big Bang and similar, math. So the seventh dimensional plane, a plane of all possible worlds with different start conditions than our own. The seventh dimension expands upon the sixth by plotting all possible worlds that begin with different start conditions than our own, and quite possibly conditions that we might imagine, but have not necessarily experienced, ourselves. The eighth dimension, a plane of all possible worlds, each with different start conditions, each branching out infinitely. So I know this is a lot to take in. The ninth dimension, all possible worlds, starting with all possible conditions and laws of physics, both known and unknown to us. And this also explains why, just maybe we have made contact with extraterrestrial beings. Maybe we have made contact with inter and intra-dimensional beings, but don't quite yet have the science to mark that in time, to repeat that. Because science is about being able to duplicate something, repeat it, give it a set of laws, rules, and protocols that the next scientist can come behind and sort of recreate that same process. But in each of these dimensions, which represent all possible start conditions, the laws of physics are completely different than the ones that we can imagine. The 10th dimension, infinite possibilities. At this level of complexity, everything is possible and imaginable. It exists somewhere in one of the other dimensional spaces. Those things that we worry about them to the point that they're very real for us, it's a real worry, it's a real concern, exist already in one of these dimensional spaces. Those things that we would imagine, that we would seek to be our reality or a part of our reality, already exist in one of these dimensional spaces. And of course, there are dimensional spaces that we can't envision, ain't in our memory. We wasn't even thinking about that. We didn't even know that was a possibility. We didn't even know that was coming. Sometimes we refer to that as it came out of the blue. It came out of the left. And so we, as gods, having this spiritual experience as a part of natural reality, have the ability to not only see and perceive through our eye, through our dream eye, through our third eye, through our heads, all possible realities, but we also have the ability to pull them in to the present, to make them more and more a part of our present. And in my understanding, that's what this game is. That's why we're here. That's what our purpose is. My beloved Denise Augustine says, we're here to serve. And serve, because of, the corruption of words, takes on many lives for some of us when we hear serve, or we hear submit, or we hear humility or humble ourselves. It has everything to do with what we've experienced and what we already believe and understand about ourselves to be true in relationship to those words. So when I say humility or humble or to submit or to be passive too, man, I'm talking about taking a position of authority beneath something so much bigger than myself, which is this creative universe, which is God, Olodumare, Mawo Lisa, all the language that we have, again, to explain the multi-dimensional reality that God is. So please come on in. I don't want to be the only one dominating the conversation. Project Oshun asks, do we find that fasting impacts dreams? It absolutely can. And For more than one reason. We've discussed this before, and some people aren't quite happy about my personal response to it. I don't think fasting is quite natural to the body. We need food to survive. We need food for energy. I think we've learned fasting through certain cultural nuances from East Asia, the Middle East. We see fasting in Christianity and Islam now. Of course, we see fasting among monks. It is said some monks fast until they, turn into a mummy, until they mummify, have given up all connections to life and physicality in some way, and turn their body. This is a real story now, and turn their body literally into a mummy, and then that is, encased in something sacred, wrapped in something sacred, and then they use that priest's body, almost like an amulet, or a talisman of some sort. There are West African cultures that don't necessarily watch a body be mummified naturally, but when someone does pass, that body, those bones are taken and kept in a place of great honor. I can't think of one particular ethnic group right now that the men sort of create these crowns with these baskets on top, and the elders sit within the basket, the bones themselves. I've seen rituals in China where sacred burial grounds are unearthed every 2 or 3 years, and then the bodies are washed, or the bones are washed and redressed, and then returned, to a sacred space. So, it's just my personal opinion. I think fasting can aid spiritual growth and development, particularly those of us in the West who might, still be detoxing and weaning ourselves off of things that we don't need, foods we don't need, vices and habits, that we don't need, that bring harm and toxins to the body. Fasting can absolutely be, beneficial for that. But going without food can absolutely affect your dreams, your visions, but being careful about the balance of that thing. You can be dehydrated and see lights and colors, as well as being, hydrated and full, and still being able to see, and visions and dreams, and make a differentiation between the two. So, yeah, it definitely can affect, and I'm sure my co-hosts have their own opinions, about fasting. Thank you, Dark Soju. I'm still a little bit uncomfortable with that whole idea, though it happens probably a lot more than people realize. That they say that I'm in their dreams, I show up in their dreams. I've known since a young age I had the ability to project myself into people's dreams, so I never want people to think that I'm doing that, particularly without, permission, unless you mean me harm. Now, if you mean me harm and I'm showing up in your dreams, I'm probably am projecting. But I never want people to think that, so I don't talk about it a whole lot. This is probably the first time I've ever talked about it out loud at all. The idea of me showing up in people's dreams, me projecting myself into people's dreams, and how universal that is. I mean, people in France and Ireland and Iran and just remote parts of the other world who write me, email me, or call me and say that I was either teaching them something in their dream, protecting them from something in their dream, participating in some kind of ritual or ceremony in their dream. And in my own youth, my early 20s, coming up in this practice, in this tradition, particularly when I was in Chicago working with Bahala. Um, he and I, where two or more gathered, he and I would visit rock shops, crystal shops, sacred spaces in the Chicago area together routinely. Then go have coffee, or then go have lunch. And we would see spiritual phenomenon take place, all around us. But I remember during that season when we were spending almost every day together, having one particular dream. I'm in Mexico. I knew I was in Mexico. It was a knowing, it was a feeling. I was in Mexico. We were out in the middle of the desert. We had apparently gathered by choice from various parts of the world. And we created sort of this medicine wheel, this medicine circle. And we all stood at the perimeters of the circle. Some had instruments, others had drums. Some were speaking chants and vibrations that you could feel all the way to your bones. And it was in a dream. Bahala was in the dream. So I've had dreams, I've had visions, I've even had astral travel events, flying events. During the Persian Gulf War, I would fly over the troops in my dream state, often sprinkling some kind of pixie dust, which at the time I didn't understand what was going on. Until later, many of them started coming back with these odd diseases, and I then understood that I was sprinkling some kind of protection, on them to prevent them from, attaching to whatever that germ warfare was. So I appreciate the comments about the dreams. If I act a little weird, it's because it's still a little weird to me, even though I know it's happening. I can't explain it entirely. So far, no one has had a negative repercussion to the dreams. So I pray Dark Soul Jua and the Goddess Initiative and many others that y'all understand. I get a dream letter, at least one a day. So sometimes it's off-putting, and I begin to wonder, what's going on that I'm showing up so frequently, in people's dreams. Otun, are you with us, beloved?
Absolutely. I'm just listening to everything and enjoying it. I will say that a lot of the times it may not always be, it again goes to what you said about it being important to journal, because the messages may not be clear. It may be things that we may consider strange. I'm so sorry you hear my puppy in the background. Things that we may feel is strange, and then we take notes on it, because as we read over it, we go back and revisit it over time, or we may see things that may happen in our lives that may actually make sense.
And you don't have to apologize for the animal. Animals can be very in tune. So just kind of figure out what's going on. It could be somebody lurking outside your house, and the animal is responding. So, let them get some air, some water. Maybe let them out in the yard for a quick minute, just to kind of figure out, what the dog might be sensitive to. We had a number of dogs growing up. And let me say, my dad had the worst relationship with dogs. So we had dogs that would climb the fence, 12-foot fence, would seek to escape. One dog hung itself during a thunderstorm, scratched its way, somehow got the basement door open, and then closed the door on itself. Yeah, and I understood, even as a kid, it had everything to do with the energy that my dad showed in the house. My mom had what you might call a black thumb. So every plant would die. No house plants would live, in our house growing up. So y'all hear me talk about abuse, but it was wickedness in my house. It was evil in that house. And that's why I like and enjoy opening up these conversations about spirit and spiritual phenomenon. We always knew that something lived sort of in the rafters of our house. And at some point, me and my sister were probably shared upstairs. She had one half and I had one half as small children. And I guess around puberty, She got moved to the first floor, and then I had the whole entire upstairs to myself. And I want y'all to pay attention to moves like that in your house too, by the way, my sisters. Pay attention to moves like that. This downstairs guest room was right next to their bedroom, and subsequently became a problem moving forward, if you understand what I'm trying to say. So without having a witness or the security of the two of us being on the same floor, it then subsequently made both of us vulnerable as children. But that's a whole nother story. But as a child, I always knew that there was something evil in the house, in the rafters of the house, in the wall of the house. We probably had to attend to the installation in that house at least twice. I think once a tree fell on our house and damaged part of the roof, and we had to redo it. Probably the first time we did it, it was just probably a part of the upgrade, of the house. But those were two unique occasions that, I remember being in the rafters of the house and being made to spend time in the rafters of the house. That was one of my duties, when I came home from school, was to go upstairs and staple down, this insulation. And any of the men and or women in the audience who know anything about installation, skilled people get paid to do installation. You don't get a 12-year-old kid, to staple insulation. So my dad was off the charts, wicked. And having said that, some people in the family, for years suggested that there was some black magic going on, that there was some root work going on, even in the securing my mother and marrying her and maintaining the relationship in those dynamics among his family. It was rumored that something, was being done or manipulated. He was also, if this matters to any of you, a 33rd. He was also a 33rd. So people also thought that there was something, within the knowledge, of Masonic, orders that also played into sort of this heightened hyper energy that existed around us. Not just abuse, and tragic, but sort of this evil footprint. And so I was able to dominate it, not have it dominate my life at a very young age. But I also was able, through journaling and keeping up with it, chart that, and I've said this on previous shows before, that some of the craziest events for the country have often happened with me being in that city at the time. Some of the biggest earthquakes in Los Angeles, in the last 40 years, I was in LA at the time that the earthquake came. One of the biggest hurricanes that hit and devastate, our country in over a century. I was in New Orleans at the time. That's the kind of footprint that I'm talking about. So I believe that not only do there exist within nature spirits, powers, nymphs, gnomes, whatever you want to call them, elves, fairies, and in any world language that exists to not only sort of assist humanity, but to also impede humanity and play little games and tricks on humanity and cause us to sort of question, sometimes our own beliefs, our own sense of understanding, of reality at any time. And how under those conditions as a kid, I was able to still see light at the end of the tunnel. I can't explain it to you, other than it was very real for me. The voodoo was very real for me from the youngest of ages. And so I knew that no matter what I was enduring, what I was up against, what kind of darkness was being, demonstrated before us, that it had ultimately a reasoning that led to my personal empowerment, my personal growth, my personal protection and defensive mechanisms. I had dreams in that house where, the rooms would elongate, almost like a horror movie, and would open up and would expand. And my bed would get farther and farther away from the window than what was normal. And as a kid, is that a dream? Is that a vision? Is that a poltergeist? Is that some sign of a mental health condition? And I think the further we get from childhood, the more that plays on the mental health aspect of who we are, because we live in a world that erases that out of us, that tries to remove that kind of creativity out of us, that tries to shut down imagination, that tries to shut down spiritual empowerment. If you were listening while I was talking about the dimensional spaces, I've always made a correlation between that and why, generally speaking, we only talk about the 7 chakras. Those within some range that we can affect some change, growth, and development from. But those dimensional spaces, 8, 9, 10, and quite possibly 26, where realities exist that don't mirror our understanding, that don't mirror what we know to be real. I think there's a great deal of fear and power associated with humanity tapping those levels of consciousness. We look at our martyrs in society. I'm sorry, I'm gonna let you in, Neophyte. Our martyrs in society, religious, spiritual martyrs. We're talking about people who somehow ascended, transcended the basic 7 chakras, begin to see the future, begin to show signs of the spirit. Even in the Bible, y'all have a list of signs of the spirit, gifts of the spirit, signs that suggest that either God is with you, spirit, or you're having some kind of spiritual, phenomenon take place. Come on, Neophyte Bokor. I almost forgot you were on the phone line, beloved.
Yeah, it's all right. Quite all right. I just wanted to expand on some of that, if I can, because, again, traveling this country and being able to get into some of these different environments where deep within the ground, you have different elements. The oil fields, even when you get into like Arizona, where you get a lot of the different minerals are still abundant in the ground. You get up to New Mexico, where there's literally a lava field that stretches out for about 200 miles, and you can drive through. The more you become accustomed to being in these areas, the more you become attuned with how your awareness stretches when you're around certain elements.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've said before, as I lose service when I go through the ley lines, when I pass through certain parts in El Paso, Texas. Leaving outside of El Paso, there's definitely a triangle of different ley lines that come together, and it will drop out your service, mainly because you're dealing with radio waves and bandwidths, and your body is affected by that. Understanding your chakras is very useful, but by all means, if anybody is new to the chakra system, don't just stop with understanding 1 chakra or 2 or even 7. Understand that is still only the beginning of the chakra system itself, and understand what organ is connected with that chakra, so that you can understand what it feels like when it's being activated, how you can become aware of it. It's just like your fingertips, all coming together at different points of your body. These nerve endings coming together, and electricity still is responsible for the feeling that you get inside of your body and out. So when you're going through these different waves, mm-hmm. or let's make it really plain. If you're near an airport, there's a lot of different radio waves and frequencies that are going around your airport. You're gonna get choked up because you're third chakra is being blocked by the radio waves that are prevalent as they're trying to guide planes in.
Mm-hmm.
Your sympathetic chakra is going to be activated forcibly, and you're not going to feel too good. Right? Then you go out into a mountainous region where your crown chakra is going to be highly elevated because you're away from all of the lower frequencies. The lower frequencies are going to be at lower elevations. I mean, this is right there in your basic science.
Mm-hmm.
When dealing with light itself. Light is the same as sound when you start dealing with that. It all is a wave. Even particles respond in a wave. So you're definitely activating colors, light frequencies.
And even those open areas, even those open areas that we call desert, or parts of Oklahoma, Arizona, Montana, with just miles of just, quote unquote, open land. We never know what lies beneath the ground either, water or mineral deposits or things that really shape, and shift the energy. To my cousins, I've never said this before, Oloye, but I was in the military in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I visited Lawton, Oklahoma, and there was a very different energy out there, when I was on that base. It affected my dreams. That's another area outside of Los Angeles that I've had, what I believe to be alien or extraterrestrial contact or messaging from. And I know that that's still a little understood part of the country, from a spiritual perspective.
Very.
I know that the indigenous people held a great deal of that land where you are now, as the sacred or cursed, depending on the activity, that took place there.
Indeed. What they deem as the 5 civilized tribes, and many of the others, of course, have been out here. Many had made, of course, the trip from the East Coast with the Trail of Tears out here. So there's many that were originally East Coast communities that wound up here in Oklahoma. I think I spoke one point that Oklahoma was said to be the land where the freed blacks were to come to get the 40 acres. And so, we're looking at that. We look at Oklahoma being in that territory time, being a place with Texas, right? New Mexico and all Mexico and all of that being this land, down all the way down. And so we're looking at significant ancestry there. When I look at certain areas, always get blasted more on these tornadoes and all of that than others. And so I look and I say to myself, what happened to our native family in these areas? Because to me, it is the spirit of anger in those ancestors that are sending a message as to why they destroy everything in those areas. And some other areas don't really get hit nearly as heavy. So for me, I am totally not surprised. That's only an hour away from me. So, I'm totally not surprised, especially when you drive down there from Oklahoma City down to Lawton. I often, when I'm driving down, envision these native people in the hills when I'm driving down there. I'm often seeing them look out to the road, even when I'm driving on from Oklahoma City down to Texas, and you see certain areas where it's wide open or where it's hills, and I often am viewing them watching and not happy at all. So you know, it is not surprising to me that, especially since we have Native ancestry within us, that, you know, we have that connection with our ancestors, with our Native ancestors, and they might be, some of that energy come through us, directly through us, and effect in our thoughts subconsciously, affect some of the things that go on. Why certain storms are never to be near us. There's a lot of times I go to Oya before these storms start hitting, and I'm grateful. That's right, Moore, Oklahoma. Absolutely get blasted every single time. But yet Norman really does not. And then up a little bit further up into Oklahoma City, only certain areas might get touched a little bit deeper than others. It is very, very interesting to me when we go through storm season. I myself don't really get too worried. I do my ebo, I do my prayers, I make my offering. I'm good. But, you know, in certain areas, yes, I'm not surprised at all.
You have community here who does the same. You know, they make the ebo, they might do a public prayer, public demonstration, you know, of a ritual, not only before hurricane season, which officially started June 1st, by the way, but particularly when certain hurricanes are coming and look like they might threaten the area. And I've indeed seen and felt and experienced the energy of the people as a collective sort of shift and move storms, interact with storms. I've seen storms come through that, you know, for lack of better words, I knew that couldn't be prevented, you know, or blocked. As you said, the ancestors are upset, nature is upset, God, you know, the creators are upset, you know, and indeed they're targeting certain regions. Many of us feel those hurricanes that come, you know, through the Middle Passage from West Africa,
Yes.
from those storms to the southern region of the United States, are full of the anger and vitriol and in some cases madness, you know, of our ancestors in response to, you know, enslavement. That Trail of Tears, you know, our people were a part of that Trail of Tears. That's one of the early stories that I heard being told in my family about that Trail of Tears, particularly from Florida, going west, and somehow we ended up right around Bogalusa. And not many of my family went much further west than that we are aware of, that we know of. And then subsequently a portion went as far west as Weed, California, at the foot of Mount Shasta, which is another great experience I need to share one day. You know, on the show, actually living on and visiting and having a party. You know, it was 1976, you know, when I was in Weed, California, at the foot of Mount Shasta, and how that affected dreams, visions, spirit manifestation, you know, around me and around others, you know, who were part of, you know, sort of that journey. So, you know, sacred land, someone questioned the viability of sacredness, sacred land, sacred space in the space of things shifting, you know, and changing, modernizing, and industrializing, you know, in some cases militarizing, you know, and whatnot. And so the ability to create sacred space, but also be aware of that space that already exists in nature that allows us to grow and to evolve, and to really see acts of magic take place first within us, and then in our outward, you know, existence every day. I like to collect elements, and you know, and I'm sure many of you do as well. You know, a jar of water from a particular river, you know, rainwater, storm water. You know, I have that ability to collect here, and even in that, in the usage of that charged water, or that charged dirt, or that charged stone, it's really empowering, but also almost magical, the type of responses that I've seen manifest in people and around people. And in some cases, they have no idea what it is or where it came from, or how I prepared it, and yet you still see almost in a scientific way that consistency of change, of cleansing, of breaking strongholds, of getting free. So I question sometimes, unfortunately not very often, the client who sort of struggles through, and I ask, are you doing the work? Are you doing the homework? And sometimes it's hard to gauge what people are doing in another state, in another town. So I ask for a lot of pictures. Some of my, chat members, Arisha send me pictures every 4 days, of her shrine work and what she's doing and sort of how she's operating, in that realm, because it is a science. It is an art. It can be magical, it can produce, supernatural events, to take place. But I think we are hardwired. Neophyte Bokur was talking about biological, what's the word you use, beloved? It's a biological wiring for us to be godlike, for us to manifest these higher elements. And in previous shows, I've introduced the idea that it's extraterrestrial. That indeed, if we go back far enough, our ancestors lead to the sky, and quite possibly well-developed, entities, that don't mirror our reality, that exist inter or intra-dimensionally, from where we live,
Have you ever
to sort of cross that threshold, through a wormhole or whatever, sort of infrequently. And then we, claim that individual who has had that experience to sort of be a prophet, to sort of be called.
Have you ever thought?
We can't hear you.
You can't?
Oh, wait a minute.
Hello?
It's my fault. Okay. I can hear you.
Have you ever thought of the connection that those that we deem with mental health issues sometimes have a very, very deep connection with spirit? That sometimes the messages that we deem as these crazy messages in actuality have a very strong level of truth, and they become very lucid when they talk to you. Then they might go back to the struggles or challenge, and if it is a struggle or challenge, it could just be a more lifted up divine connection that they have. Have you ever thought that for some of them, there is a divinity that is within them? For us in Ifa, they have the connection with Obatala. So Obatala is the one that covers them. When we find one that has disability, or we find one that has a mental struggle or challenge, it is Obatala that is their covering. So it's, with that being said, it's very interesting sometimes, and I take the time to listen to them. I take the time, the moment, just to lay back and to listen to them. While others are making fun or whatever they're doing, I take the moment to listen to them, because spirit then gives us messages through sometimes the most uncanny ways. And then if we're humble and we're obedient, we learn a lesson from them that others bypass, or they don't even understand.
That's right. Even their magical book says, be sure that you are not entertaining angels unaware.
That's correct. I was always taught that you absolutely never know who it is that's approaching you and the lesson or the message that might be given to you. I was always taught carry some singles in your wallet all the time, because you never know. It might be a person that's asking you for money, but you got to also listen to how many times that they're asking you.
Mm-hmm.
Take a look sometimes at the colors that they're wearing. It might open up insight to the very energy that's approaching you. And then sometimes when you humble yourself and you show kindness and gratitude and humbleness and you give them something, sometimes, and I also ask them to pray for me. Pray for me too. You know, here, pray for me, okay? And then, have you ever noticed that maybe a few days later, something beautiful happens in your life? Where there's a connection, there's a spiritual connection to that. I'm not saying all the time, but I'm saying we must be alert and attuned to their energy as well. Because their energy, as we talk about a baby's energy being very close spiritually, their energy, as backed in our feeling, in our tradition, our wisdom, by Obatala, brings wisdom, light. It brings tranquility. It brings all of the realms of Obatala. So be mindful. Don't just disregard what they say. Listen closely. Listen closely. Sometimes there's great answers, great wisdom in what they say. Just like alcoholics, we sit there and judge them, but yet sometimes those gentlemen or ladies give you the most divine wisdom you could have ever gotten from anybody else that you deem as normal.
Yeah. Being from the city, I understand the magic of winos and elders who look like winos. Come on, Neophyte Bakur, speak up for me.
Oh, yes. See, I also have an experience with, and I like making sure that I ground myself in science. That way, for those that are skeptical, there is little ground for you to maneuver on how the spiritual science works. If your home is not grounded, the amount of positive energy that is free roaming in your home will have a negative effect on you, because that positive feed coming into your home needs to ground to something. And guess what? It's going to ground to you. It's not going to electrocute you, not unless you go and touch something you're not supposed to, or plug something into something that you're not supposed to. But that energy still is enveloping. It will permeate all of your living spaces, all of your living environment, and all of that positive energy only attracts the negative. That's why it always seems like it's so dark and heavy in your home. You know, understand that this is not just your sacred space, your living space and everything, but scientifically you have to make sure that even your safe space is protected and grounded the way it's supposed to be. Not just your soul needs to be grounded, but your home needs to be grounded too. It's a safety issue that I've lived in a home where the electricity that was being fed into the home was not grounded because of the owner not wanting to go through certain protocols. But it had a spiritual effect where everybody was always at odds with each other. Everybody was always uncomfortable. Everybody always had some sort of angst against each other. It put a whole family that was loving and caring to each other and broke them completely apart. And you try to figure out why, and then when you bring it up, it just sounds crazy.
Yeah,
it just sounds like it doesn't make any sense.
There's verses of Ifa that tell you must clean this or clean your home. That the Ajogun, are residing in your home. And the reason why you're having conflict in this and that is because the Ajogun are sitting there hiding or sitting there in so you go back and you deep clean your home. Have you ever felt the energy get lighter when you clean the room, clean the house? And so it brings a whole energetic change. So everything that the brother said, as well as understand that spiritually and energetically, that there can be the negative energies that reside there until you wipe them. And there's a magic to how you clean from the back to the front and then out the door. And there's certain things like when we do and we blow certain things out the door to keep that away or to attract another level of energy in. So, I think that there's a lot to these aspects that we must just take hold to. Our parents or our elders, our ancestors used to tell us, you need to go clean your house. You need to go clean your closet. If your closet is a wreck and it's got clutter all over the place, you're holding Ajogun. They have a place to be. You see all these issues and struggles because your stuff is cluttered, and that brings clutter to your life. So just a couple of things that also add to what we're talking about, yes, and what it is that you clean with. What is it that you're cleaning with? Luckily, I have a Mortal Kenny here, Sister Cat, who has her own stuff that she makes. So I get it from her. Then I might add some of the Florida water and be praying into that water before I start cleaning. Because energetically, I want the cleansing and clearing. She talked about cleansing and clearing. Yeah. The cleansing and clearing of Ajogun, of negative energy and negative spirit to move out of this house, out of my temple. So there's a lot that we do, Sometimes
Grandma would sweep around your own front doorstep.
That's right.
Before you sweep around mine.
That's right.
I wanted to answer Anthony X's question about Simbi spirits, and then I wanted to answer the next question was, Roderick Smith. Well, maybe we'll do it in reverse. Roderick Smith wanted to know how to learn about Orisha and the spiritual practices. I think that's best done through a active, authentic Orisha priest or Babalawo who's operating in Ifa, who's operating in Orisha. We in Louisiana Voodoo absolutely deal with Orisha, but we don't deal with Orisha the same way they do in Lukumi or Santeria or Nago tradition, for that matter. And the first question was the importance of Simbi spirits. In Voodoo, Simbi spirits represent two kinds of spirits. First, dead twins. So, a woman is pregnant with twins, maybe one lives and one doesn't. That creates a Simbi or symbiotic connection. The second choice is where two souls or two spirits are knit together, often in a past life, in a past existence, and then they are now working together, typically as Hogans or Bokors or Voodoo practitioners. And it's traditionally men who work together. Right now, I can't think I've ever seen a demonstration of a woman working in a Simbi-like possession. It's typically men, and their powers, their energies will come together, and that creates a greater sacred space. That creates a greater connection to spirit. They're able to heal. They're able to mix certain combinations of herbs and potions together, and produce a result that they might not be able to produce similarly, singularly, or individually on their own. Simbi can often be, embedded in doll work or statuary or other implements that sort of unify these two people, these two forces together. My house is actually a Simbi house. I just don't talk about it a whole lot. A lot of people aren't even aware of what Simbi and many of the other Loa families, because many of these Loa, including Gede, exist as a family of spirits that individually serve very different purposes. But Simbi are twin souls, twin spirits, sometimes created out of death. You know, one twin survives, the other doesn't survive. I think in Nigeria, among the Yoruba, sometimes you see women tie a ibeji to their back or keep an ibeji in their clothing. You see the same thing in Togo, Benin, and they have to treat the ibeji as similarly as they do the living child to keep the negative energy from the child who didn't survive. You know, and they describe it as, you know, jealousy or envy or some sense of isolation or neglect, and then that affects the living. That affects the living. So they treat the ibeji like they do the living child, either on the shrine work or even actively in other forms of Ebo, to prevent any negative transfer back from that child who didn't survive into the living world.
Do they do that with older as well? Like if twins, you know, maybe at a later stage, teenage stage, or early 20s, or whatever, you know, the case might be. Is that also in that realm, in that stage as well?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. You'll see someone who maybe lost a child, a grown woman working with Ibeji. You see men working with Ibeji because they're also seen as drawers of Aj or luck and prosperity. I know some people who are fearful of not just Ibeji, but what they're called in Akan. They typically have a round face, and then have arms, and then have a body. Very similar to a Ibeji, but in Akan they're called, oh wow. They're often generalized as fertility dolls in English, but they have another name in Akan that, for whatever reason, escapes me right now. But the power of these objects are so well known, and particularly in Louisiana, you really can't play with a Ibeji or one of these Fanti or Akan dolls around most women who are aware of what they do. They incite, they create pregnancy. You know, so if you're trying to get pregnant, you might carry, you know, an Ibeji. You might rub an Ibeji on your stomach. So some women here fear the next pregnancy or ain't trying to have no other kids. I've seen a room cleared out of women just because somebody brought, you know, a real Ibeji into the room. So that power translated through the Middle Passage still exists in Louisiana, Mississippi to some degree. They do treat sort of the rag dolls with a greater degree of safety. I've never seen anybody sort of flee the room when a rag doll was produced, but certainly the wood carved. I'm still trying to pull that word out of my memory. The wood carved Ibejis, the wood carved Akuba. That's what it is. It's called an Akuba doll. Akuba doll. Flat face usually. Sometimes they're three-dimensional, but they're often flat and round, and then some kind of stylized arms and some kind of stylized body. So you'll see them often in tragedy. If a child dies, particularly if a twin dies, you'll see them for prosperity among men and women to draw certain blessings, the gift of children, the gift of more money, the gift of more resources to support, you know, the children. And in indigenous culture here in Louisiana, Mississippi Delta, you also see that with corn among the Native Americans. Corn is also seen and symbolized as many children. And you know, when we do Kwanzaa, Dr. Karenga wrote corn into the implements of Kwanzaa. I think he calls them mazeo in Swahili. And they are supposed to represent the generations, the children, the children to come. And if your corn cob loses corn after Kwanzaa, naturally it falls off. It's supposed to represent coming children. I know some of y'all ain't never heard that before, but yeah. So we use a lot of corn, multicolored Indian corn in my house, in Black Hawk Voodoo tradition, in Masking Mardi Gras Indian tradition, and it's treated very similarly here locally, the way many in the community treat the Akuba doll or the Beiji. You either trying to get pregnant, you either trying to receive that energy, or they're running from it. You know, for whatever personal reason, you know, that a woman might not want more kids, or might not like the sound of, you know, having more kids, you know, at an unexpected season of her life. So humorously, in all due respect, it's a bit of a party favor. You know, a sister might bring one out at a party just to see how the women in the room, you know, are going to respond to it, and that's a very New Orleans thing. And that's why I love New Orleans. You know, these traditions and these cultures still survive. People are very careful about angering children. Adopting children who are in distress is a very common thing here in our city, particularly when we start looking back, you know, a few generations. Not quite the same today, you know, as it was 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. But if a child was in danger, someone took that child, either a family member, somebody in the neighborhood, and it wasn't no, you know, child protective services and, you know, getting legal, you know, all that wasn't even a requirement. If someone wanted the child and was going to take better care of the child, then they removed that child, you know, from the abusive environment, you know, from the troubled, you know, scenario. So how children are buried, how children are taken care of, how children are protected is still deeply ingrained in Louisiana, Mississippi Delta voodoo. So you'll see childlike items, you know, in the shrine. Of course, Eshu, Legba, Ilegwa are also sort of incorporated into that equation. There's a general understanding that Legba guards and protects and defends, you know, children, whether they're in the house or in the street. So often people say, oh, that little toy, that little ball, you know, they'll say that's for Legba, they say that's for Eshu. But it's also for the disgruntled children. And that might be harder for many people to discuss, you know, aborted child, child that they lose through, what do you call it? Help me out, Otun, when a woman loses a child, preterm for some medical reason.
Miscarriage.
Yeah, a miscarriage. Heaven forbid a child is murdered, you know, or killed by accident or energy. Those energies are handled very differently. Those dead are handled very differently to ensure that those spirits don't become troublesome. So even when you walk around with some of these tour guides, and they're talking about ghost stories, some of the most frightful ones involve children. Even in the telling of Madame Lalaurie, some of you were introduced to her through American Horror Story, but this is a true story, who murdered slaves, mutilated slaves, used their blood, used their body parts, you know, out of some sense of beautifying or out of some personal satisfaction. Who knows why, you know, somebody does, you know, something that egregious. But it's often the haunting of the children and the younger people that are most talked about, you know, and tend to show up and spook people the most when they come here and sort of creep around that house and that part of the French Quarter and hear the telling of that story. Even as a bit of a ghost detector myself, I often feel children the strongest, the loudest, the most present, because typically a child is going to move on to the to the next phase, to the next realm. It's not going to have a lot of the attachments that often older people have. So often, if a child's spirit lingers, there's some kind of trauma attached to it. There's some kind of shadow work, attached to it. The child, the mother, the circumstances, upon which the child, sort of passed through. So Simbi, even as magicians, Anthony X, are seen to be a little bit frightful in both Haiti and Louisiana voodoo, only because their powers seem to be so heightened, so great. And so they're often called on to handle imprisonment, jail, egregious legal and judicial, injustices. Certainly things like Atosa, would have Simbi like Loa and even Simbi like Gede, attached to it. So I know I went deep with that, but that's the first time I think I've ever discussed Simbi at all in the 12 years that I've done this show. And I consider myself a bit of a, I don't know, specialist in the area of Simbi. I've had to work with Simbi a great deal over the course of my ministry. So I appreciate the opportunity.
I want to add, I remember you spoke, Divine, about, I believe earlier in the show about you were told that we only use about 70% of our brain. It reminded me of a very, very interesting movie, and a very powerful movie that I saw called Lucy. And I don't remember the lady's name, the white lady that played in it, but I know it also had Morgan Freeman. And if you have the opportunity, if you have not seen it, I think that would be a really interesting movie for you to watch, or anyone. Anyone that can get a hold of that movie, because it deals with the percentage of the brain and things something that was created to help a person actually access a different or more areas of the brain. And the movie itself was absolutely crazy, but it was really good. It makes you think. It is deep. If you really watch it and pay attention, it is so much deeper than what it looks. But that movie is something. So I definitely recommend that.
Okay. Gabby, yes. And particularly where violence, domestic violence, issues around love, relationships, home life, children, yes. And I say this all the time to my clients, the illusion of an issue, a block, a complication is often being pushed forward by your ancestors first, because they've had an human incarnation. They know what relationships are. They know what love is. They know what hate is. They understand our human experience. And so often your ancestors will absolutely get involved when there's a problem, when there should be a break, where there should be a divorce, where there should be some intervention, where there should be some elders, within the dynamics of the family and the circle. And when that doesn't happen, or there aren't elders present, or there isn't family members present, they definitely can then show up in real world events, in our homes, in our lives, in our circles, and are pushing you away from that scenario, or pushing you away.
You.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And protecting you, especially if you're talking about the thing of her face being in that area. That's saying that she's there with you, and that she's looking to protect you, but also that you have to make wise choices in order for you to do that work to protect yourself as well.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, there is that distinction between Marasa and Simbi. And Simbi can be in water, Simbi can be in the marshland, Simbi can be in the bayou, Simbi can exist, wherever there's a physical connection, most certain. Marasa tends to be more practitioners who are pulling from that dual polarity, that dual energy. But yeah, you're right, and there's still that distinction. Gabby and any others who are listening, I had to say this because I know we've run out of time. Please, please, please listen to your ancestors when they're calling your attention to these relationships. People are under a great deal of stress. People have always been under a great deal of stress, PTSD, past unhealed abuses, past unhealed shadow work. And this year or more of pandemic and isolation and dramatic forced change has really pushed some people to the limit. And it's showing up in relationships, partnerships, marriages, scenarios with roommates, housemates. Please get out as soon as possible. If you need help, ask for help. If you haven't let anybody know, let somebody know. Talk to your parents, your elders, their parents, their elders. Don't feel like you have to walk through this together. I'm particularly burdened right now with requests, primarily from women who want to return to, who want to rejoin with someone that's already demonstrated themselves to be violent, domestically violent or out of control domestically, verbally abusive. Some of you don't associate, verbal abuse, demeaning, belittling with abuse. That's abuse. I don't want to hear, well, he doesn't hit me. Well, but he's damaged your self-esteem. He's drugged you down to the floor. And I'm most troubled by the women who are trying to reconnect, who are trying to reconnect. Often, I've said this before, I often don't let people talk like the first 30 minutes of a divination, much like this show. And I'm speaking and the spirit is coming out and I'm reading the shells, I'm reading, the sign, the Odu that's fallen. And then they start confirming, yeah, you're right, because, and then they start confirming all these abusive scenarios. As a descendant of that, as a child who went through that, it's a horror story for me every day to hear that, to see that. And I often end up asking the question, why? You want to reconnect with this person, why? The same person who doesn't respect you, who's degraded you, who's dehumanized you. And yes, sometimes the answer is, well, we got kids. No, you're not staying for the kids. In fact, the kids are absorbing the negativeness that you aren't talking about, that you aren't sharing, but you're carrying around in your body, in your energy, in your spirit. If there's therapy, active therapy to seek it out. Seek it out. But once it's clear that your partner is out of control, you've got to get out. You've got to get out. I'm talking to people collectively, but I'm also speaking to very specific individuals right now. You've got to get out. And I can't tell you what, going back to how we carry energy from our divinations and our readings, I can't tell you what that does to me. Sometimes I get off the phone and I just be exasperated. And I have to scream sometimes. What? Get back with that. Why? Reconnect with that. Why? There's always an option. Am I wrong, Otun? There's always an option.
Not wrong at all. Absolutely correct.
So I had to say that. Yeah, I had to get that out. Know that we're here for you, any one of us. Let me scroll contact information. Please do like, subscribe to the show, both on the YouTube platform, but also on my blog talk radio. platform, blogtalkradio.com/the-divine-prince. Please do support and communicate with our beloved cousins. First, Oloye, Ifawole, Oladeji, Efuntade, Chief Priest of IleIfaOladeji, Oladeji, also Inner Consciousness Spiritual Center, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. IleIfaOladeji at gmail.com. Please do acknowledge, show support, show respect. The Ile is IleIfaOladeji. Oh no, that's your username. Okay, the Gmail is the address. I think that's your username that came after. Forgive me for that. I'm gonna clean that up. And of course, my beloved cousin Otun, Ifatomiwa, and her Armoredingrace organization, ministry, healing practice, empowerment center. All that God would have her to do with us and for us.
Ashe.
Ashe.
Ashe. And know that you're never alone in any of this. Know that you're never alone in any of this. And I look forward to meeting you all here again at high noon U.S. Central Standard Time for now another powerful edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. All is truly and indeed a blessing. Ashe and Odabu.
Ashe.
Odabu.
Thank you all again for a powerful broadcast.